Hi, I'm Paul Golaszewski with the Legislative Analyst Office. In this webcast, I'll be discussing our recent expenditure projections for corrections, such as prisons. First, to give you a little background, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, also known as CDCR, is responsible for managing the adult felons at 33 state prisons, as well as juvenile offenders at 6 youth correctional facilities. In addition, CDCR supervises and provides services to parolees and wards released to the community. After taking out certain expenditures, such as those related to capital outlay, the 2009-10 budget includes about $7.6 billion in general fund for CDCR operations. This level of funding assumes about $1.2 billion in savings from the department's budget due to various policy actions that the legislature adopted to reduce the inmate and parole populations, as well as from other administrative and programmatic changes. Now I'll talk about our expenditure forecast for CDCR. For 2009-10, our forecast assumes that general fund expenditures for CDCR operations will total roughly $9 billion. This is about $1.4 billion more than the budgeted level of $7.6 billion that I mentioned earlier. There are three main reasons why we are forecasting this higher level of spending. First, our forecast assumes that CDCR will only realize about half of the $1.2 billion in savings that I discussed earlier. This is largely due to implementation delays and lower than expected savings associated with some of the policy and programmatic changes. In addition, we assume that a roughly $200 million reduction to the inmate medical care budget will not be achieved as planned. Finally, we assume that state spending on contract medical services for prison inmates will continue at present levels throughout the forecast period and thus require an ongoing adjustment of about $500 million to the department's budget. Now, for the out years of our forecast, we are projecting that CDCR's general fund spending will increase from the $9 billion that I mentioned in the current year to nearly $11 billion by fiscal year 2014-15. This translates into an average increase in spending of about 4% each year during the forecast period. The projected growth is primarily due to the expiration of about $1 billion in one-time general fund offsets to CDCR's budget in 2009-10 from federal stimulus funds and a local government finance shift. In addition, we estimate that there will be increased operating costs totaling $800 million to staff and operate new prison facilities that will be built during the forecast period. These facilities were initially authorized by the legislature in 2007. Specifically, our projections assume that about 16,000 additional prison beds will be built in the next 5 years. Now finally, I'd like to talk for a moment about one of the major uncertainties that could substantially affect our projected level of spending for CDCR operations. As you may know, a federal 3-judge panel ruled last August that the state must submit a plan to reduce its prison population by about 40,000 inmates over a 2-year period in order to reduce overcrowding in the prison system. Now, given that the 3-judge panel has not specifically ordered a reduction in the inmate population at this time, and that the administration continues to appeal the panel's orders in court, our forecast does not reflect the savings that could result from such a large population reduction. However, if the inmate population were to be reduced as a result of this litigation, we estimate that annual general fund expenditures would decrease by about $600 million at the end of our forecast period, relative to our baseline forecast for CDCR. This estimate takes into account both the population reduction proposals approved as part of the 2009-10 budget package and the new prison facilities that are expected to be constructed during the forecast period. However, the actual level of savings that would be realized from such a large reduction in the inmate population would of course depend upon the specific actions taken to reduce the inmate population. And that concludes this webcast about our 5-year forecast of CDCR expenditures. For more detailed information regarding these projections, please see our office's recent Fiscal Outlook report. Thanks for tuning in.